All right, welcome back for another YouTube video on how to use Power Automate. Today's focus, we're going to talk about how to build a cloud flow from a blank template. But really, what is Power Automate and how do we design a flow from a blank canvas? And now, if you've been using Power Automate for quite some time, the Copilot feature has been released. And since I've been using Power Automate for years now, to be honest, I still prefer the old version, which I always toggle in the creation of flows, which I'll get to. But this idea of using a Copilot to create the flow, it's cool. Now, don't get me wrong. I love AI. I love building Power Automate prompts. Um, and adding those actions inside of flows. However, when it comes to creating an actual flow, I found that Copilot isn't really the best friend. The reason for that is because it kind of sets a narrow view on what is possible. And what I mean by that is if you ask it to set up a certain flow, it will set up a flow on however you asked it, but is that the best flow for the the item that you're trying to accomplish? And I guess when you're starting out, it might be a good idea to try Copilot at building flows. And now, don't get me wrong, Microsoft has done a great job building this out. Um, I would like to say I was one of the first ones using the Copilot in this manner within Power Automate. Um, but it's still in a, I wouldn't say an infancy stage, but it's still learning. So that's why I'm making this video. How to build a Power Automate flow from a blank template. So to do that, we can just hit the create button. Now we could look at the templates, but no, we're talking about a blank template. I have never used a template. I will be straight. I have been doing it, like I mentioned, for over 7 years. I have never used a template. Now, let's actually talk about the different types of flows. As you saw from the Create tab, there's different ones, and I will take a moment here to touch on what the differences are between these, because you need to pick the right one depending on what you're doing. So, an automated cloud flow, it says it's triggered by a designed event. So, um, this can be if this can be any event within any Microsoft application, um, and we can get into very specifics. But essentially, if someone does something or if something happens in the system, you can initiate the flow based off that action. It's as simple as that. You can dive into the very detailed behaviors to determine what is going to trigger. But it's can be something as simple as when somebody creates a SharePoint page, I want this to happen. When somebody sends me an email with this word in the subject line and this person copied on the email, I want this to happen. So it's just for the most part, that's my main go-to. I like to build flows based off of activity. Okay, so the next one is going to be your instant cloud flows. Now, instant cloud flows I use a lot when it comes to developing certain parts of a flow. So if I want to test a certain part of a flow, I'll just use an instant cloud flow just to initiate the flow, just to get it started so I didn't have to create that trigger activity in the flow. So I could just push a button to test it, and that's really a really good use for the instant cloud flows. Just if you want to just push a button, you're good to go. However, it's probably only about 2% of my flows are going to be instant cloud flows. Scheduled cloud flows. Now, depending on what you're doing, for me, I have a lot of daily cloud flows. Now, a scheduled cloud flow I have for reminders. So let's say that there are tasks that need to get done. They are 3 days after the expiration date, and you want to send a reminder or whatever the logic that your business wants. Um, you know, so it's going to check every day. It's going to check um, all of the tasks. If these tasks are open and if it's greater than, let's say, 24 hours from the due date, send a reminder to the person that the task is assigned to. So it's going to be like your daily reminder. That's what the scheduled cloud flow is, your daily reminder. That's just one example. Other examples of using a scheduled cloud flow, what I like to do is um, I'll have like a snapshot of the Active Directory or like Entra users. I'll have a snapshot, and I usually do this if there are like IT ticketing systems attached to Microsoft where companies are inputting IT tickets to do change management, stuff like that. And um, and so if they put in a ticket to, let's say, change something in Entra, and let's say the ticketing system has flows attached to it, if I'll notice if a ticket, if the Entra doesn't get changed after the ticket was entered, because I know that there's a flow attached to it, then it's a way for me to create flags in the system. Of course, you should have catch fails in your flows, which just means in the event this step fails, what do you want to do? One, I want to record it that it failed. Two, I want to get notified. Three, I want to fix it. And then four, I have to rerun it if it's a case where you need to rerun it. Um, and so that is a little bit about scheduled cloud flows. And again, I can review many different scenarios for each of these and um, go over them. Describe it to design it, that's just using Copilot to do that. Desk flow, I actually like, and I build desk flows, but this focus is going to be about cloud flows. Essentially, desktop flow is you're automating your machine to do things, um, physically, like do stuff. I personally don't like it because I can't do anything while the flow is running. And maybe again, when I was building these desktop flows was years ago. Maybe it's a little different now, but I remember when I'd run the flow, my whole computer was just doing stuff and I couldn't do anything. So, for the most part, my biggest tools are going to be your automated cloud flow and your scheduled cloud flow. Instant cloud flow is great for developing a bigger automated or scheduled cloud flow. It's just good for quick tests. Okay, so let's dive right in. Um, let's go ahead and start off with an automated cloud flow. Now, when you go to start, when you go to build your flow, this is what you're going to be prompted with. You got to create the name. So this is going to be my first automated cloud flow. Now, here is going to be your list of triggers, and this is where you kind of think about your operation, right? Like, are you using Microsoft Forms, or do you want to set up a flow when somebody responds or submits an item to a Microsoft form? About when somebody creates a SharePoint item, or when somebody modifies something in a SharePoint list? Uh, that's a heavily one used. Planner, if planners used, any sort of tasks that are assigned. RSS, that that's a whole nother subject I can do a whole nother video on. So here's just a list of triggers, and it's a good idea for you to go through this list to see what is my organization using that I can apply within Power Automate Flow. And a good way to find out what it is that they're using, if you're not sure of your tech stack, is to go ahead and start wiring up all the connections. you're not sure about the connections, be sure to watch my very first YouTube video on powering up your Power Automate by establishing all of your connections. So go back and watch that video, because once you establish all the connections, then you're going to start to have all of the different options to choose from. Um, and so, and I'll actually to pause right here, just because when I mentioned earlier about one project I'm working on where I'm sending notifications to Dynamic CRM. Just the quick how I did that is Dynamic is reading Dataverse data. So I just add a row into the notifications table within Dataverse, um, within the environment that the CRM instance is stood up in. Okay. Teams, if Teams is a big tool that's used a lot now. I like doing a lot of automation in Teams. So here's just a real long list of stuff. I mean, the list goes on. I'll just like scroll. You can keep hitting show more. Goes on and on. So really, it just whatever the tech stack is that your organization uses, you're gonna find some triggers in here. Now, if you are more advanced, you want to talk about like, when a blob is added or modified, message me and we'll go down those channels, because these are going to be probably your most advanced cases of how to use Power Automate. Um, Cosmo, if your organization is using Cosmo, which is solid. Um, and And now let's talk about this. So we have this idea of building an automated cloud flow using all of these triggers that you see here. A lot of these triggers are within the Microsoft ecosystem. However, what I mentioned was not. So how did I set up a trigger to trigger a Power Automate flow when that trigger is not available here? Well, there's a lot of methods out there. Like, for example, the call system that I'm working on and setting up the automation for, um, it utilizes WebSocket messages where I could subscribe to channels and grab heartbeat messages and set up the WebSocket to do that. Now, what I just said, right? Um, but another easy way to do that is um, is this. I'm actually gonna hit skip. So what I did in order to, I triggered a Power Automate flow, which by the way had zero delay, absolute seamless, milliseconds of the completion of the flow. And how did we do that? Now, what I was talking about the version, this is the new designer. I have been designing in Power Automate with very complex flows, and to the day I cannot use the new designer. I use a lot of technology out there, but I will to the day toggle it off. Now, the interface doesn't always work when I want to toggle off new designer. That's because my cloud flows would be pretty massive and just doesn't work. So most objects within the original interface will work when my flows get huge. The size flows that I have and the new designer can't do it. Okay. Um, so how I actually initiated a trigger. Now again, there's ways to create triggers by setting up a custom connector inside of Power Automate. So if you have an API, you want to set up that API and you want to configure a trigger out of that. I mean, you can do it that way. But in this way, another way I did it was I literally, when an HTTP request is received. So once you build the flow from, or you add the schema that you want, because this, what I'm doing is I'm sending I'm sending a post action from that contact center platform that is triggered based off a certain event, and then it'll send the data automatically here. So the trigger happens inside of a different system. So I set the trigger in a different system, and then that system triggers this. So this is a great practice in how to utilize Power Automate triggers out where triggers are built outside of Power Automate. Actually, one of the coolest ones I've set up, in addition to like using an event bridge. But I really just like this standard trigger post, which is phenomenal. And so you can set it up this way, but I'm going to delete it just to go back to the original screen to show you all the different stuff that we could. So what is this screen right here? This is your action selector. So on the top to start, let me go through a little bit about this canvas here. Here's where you're going to title your flow. You can add your title here. I like to do different naming conventions, and I'll put right here if this is a daily run. I'll put it if it's like an automated cloud flow and it happens when a SharePoint list item is created. I'll just put like submission, so I know that that's a submitted trigger. If it's modified, right now, depending on the source, sometimes I'll be like SP modified. And so it's a good idea to keep your flows organized because um, you know, if you work in Power Automate much and you have hundreds of flows, it can get a little complicated. Um, and especially if like your system, like I have one of my systems that probably utilizes 10 flows or so, all in a unisync cycle. It's quite interesting, but basically if one goes down, they all go down. But with that said, design things right where they never go down. But that's the whole point of Power Automate, right? Like you're designing things so that things happen automatically, seamless, without fail, and you can trust that it's going to get the job done. Yes, there are perks like boom, saving time, saving money. I just love this tool. It's the best. So that's the title. Up here, you can search for connections, but I'll tell you what these are. Here is just a quick way to get to certain things. And as a matter of fact, I'm going to show you something that I wish somebody showed me early on in my days using Power Automate. So I'm actually just going to choose one from this window just to show you, okay? And I'm going to add another step just to pop up this window. So this is typically the window that you see because you're going to add a connection, which is a similar version of what you just saw. So here you have all built-in, standard, premium, custom. This is where you can build your custom connections. But I wish somebody told me about Clipboard. This has been just I don't know about you, but I'm a copy paste, right, kind of guy, and I think everyone is these days. So when it comes to making life simple, watch this. You're gonna click the three dot ellipsis on any action. Oh, and of course with that one I can't. So let me just come in here. I'm gonna click condition. Okay, watch it, and I'm gonna show you. There's a clipboard. Copy. Boom. It's in your clipboard. So if you get a whole action configured and there's like 30 fields in this action and you need to place that action also in another part of the flow, you don't want to rewire up all the fields. Boom, easy way. Yes, it gets a little complex when you're trying to copy actions within like a switch action. We'll talk about that later on. All right, so you're gonna go in here and you're gonna build your flow. So I have a manual trigger. but I said I wanted to wire this one up to be an automated one. So we're going to say when an item is created. So when an item is created, um, I should have all of my connections. I don't know why it's not really working right now. No, those are all good. All right, well, we're just going to jump right back into it. It's the v3 equals false. Yes, please. I tell you what, I will have to part ways with Power Automate. If they get rid of the original UI, I cannot do the new designer. And I've spent years in this platform, so I really hope they keep it. All right. We're gonna say when a new item is created, we're gonna wire it up. So here we gotta choose the SharePoint site. So I just have a couple sites in here for demonstration. We'll choose a list. Oh, I've got a basic list here. Now, what I can do is choose the next step. So what am I trying to do? Well, when an item's created, I want to send an email. You know what? When an item's created, I want to, yeah, send an email somewhere. Send an email. Now, when it comes to all of these actions in here, like send an email V2, send an email notification V3, you know, you're just going to go through all of these actions to figure out which one works best, unless you're watching little bits of parts of different videos out there. But I will say that what I found, send an email V2 is the most reliable action I have found. That's my favorite action to use is send an email v2. I can switch from a WYSIWYG editor down to HTML. So I use this a lot where let's say the organization needs to send a specific template and how you pass data, it sometimes that data actually needs to be encoded. Uh, how do I describe this without getting into too much detail? If you want to use HTML to format the body, you can do that through this view. That's how I can do it. So here I can actually expand it. And what I can do is I can actually use dynamic values. So what is a dynamic value? A dynamic value is it's a variable within your canvas, right? Your flow that you can use at any step of the way. In this example, the dynamic values available within the send an email v2 step are going to be any values coming from the when an item is created. So what kind of value could I use from the when an item is created within the to field? Well, I can actually send an email to the person who created it. So I say created by claims, display name, email. I'll choose their email. That's the easiest one. Um, Another way to do it is if I were to come in here and if I were to say search user and I were going to search somebody, say you didn't have their email, but you wanted to get their email. But let's say you had just a name. So I'm going to search for this person, and then now you wanted to get their name. Now, what I'm going to do is actually add their UPN, and I'm showing it. But what happened there, the reason why it just dropped it into an apply to each is because that this is an array. There's more than there can be more than one value, so it might need to go through a loop. But in this case, I put 1 because I want to limit the number of results found. 1. And either way, even though that it's 1, it's still putting it in because of the structured output from the search for users. But in here, it's still only going to send the 1 email because it's 1 coming back from this. Now, depending on what action that you're using, like if this is a list rows in Excel and you're using a filter query saying like where higher date is greater than, X, then anybody whose higher date is greater than X will end up getting the email in here. So it's going to loop through the email. So let's say there's 10 people in the Excel file that their higher date is greater than X. This next action is going to send that email 10 times, the same email 10 times to those people. Another way you can do it is if you wanted, instead of sending an individual email to all of those 10 people, I can create a variable where I'm creating a string of emails so that I can add it to, um, like the copy field or the blind copy field. So I'm just going to show you one of the biggest tools in creating flows are going to be utilizing variables. So they're going to be string variables, Boolean variables, um, integers, if you need a float sometimes, objects. And in this case, because I'm making a string of emails, I'm just going to put this. And then if I wanted to create the string, let's say this was the list rows in Excel action, that I have 10 rows coming. Now, before I create a variable, I always have to initialize the variable. I initialize this variable, um, and then from here, I'm going to append to string. Like let's say the value is coming from an array or something, and you want to append it to a string. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take that email. Okay, watch this. Then I'm going to go to the dynamic content. Okay. Okay, I'm going to put email. Now, here's the important part. Okay, here's the real important part here. If you want to use this as a string where it has 10 people's emails, what's the separator that you need in between each email? Semicolon. All you do is you put a semicolon at the end of it. Now what it's going to do, it's going to loop through and it's going to have a email semicolon, email semicolon. Okay. Then from here, I'm now just going to add the dynamic content. I'm going to add the emails. Now this email is no longer in a loop where I'm now sending one email to multiple people. I'm going to say this is a test. All right. And that is your quick overview on how to create a variable, how to send a series of emails that are being looped, or send one email to a string of email addresses. Okay. All right. And we're gonna say test. So right now I've did so we have a quick. Oh, you know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna go. You know what I'm gonna do? I'm gonna add another step. We're gonna say get item. So I'm gonna check something. A lot of the times I do have get items actions in flows because there's going to be data stored all over the place in many different SharePoint lists. So if SharePoint lists are heavy in your organization, um, follow here. So in this get items actions, you have a copy to clipboard, settings. Click the settings. Always turn your pagination, max it out. Now, what this means is because if your SharePoint list, let's say it has 5,000 items in the list, by default, it's only going to search, I think it's 1,000. I think it's only going to get 1,000 rows. So if I didn't turn that pagination on, I'm not going to be getting all the data that I need. So I got to turn it up. From here, I'm going to choose that list again. Now, the reason I'm showing you this is because now what you can do with SharePoint list is I can actually I can actually filter. So what this is I'm just what you do is you put the SharePoint column name, the operator. So this is equals um, equals or greater than or equal to, less than or equal to, not equals, and you know what? We're going to save the rest for another time. So equals order by, I'm going to say created descending, top count 1, save. So again, this flow, it's not technically your true business flow. I'm just showing you how to create a flow from a blank canvas doing different things. Again, this is going to be your basic flows and getting started. If you want things that are a little bit more complex, more videos are coming. All right. Let's actually now take a look. Let's go ahead and pivot on over to SharePoint, see what's going on over there. So SharePoint here, this is the SharePoint site that we have just wired up in the Power Automate flows. So the SharePoint list that you saw there, we can actually find it by going underneath the site contents. And we could see it right here. So this right here is filled with some dummy data, and I am going to trigger the flow when an item is created in this list. And we're going to watch this flow happen. Okay. So what I'm going to do is wire this up so we can watch it happen in action. Sound good? Okay. So, all right. What we'll do is we're going to get an item added. We're just going to say test 1, 2, 3. We're going to say YTV 1, 2, 3. Last name is 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Department is department. Role is role. And start date is today. Okay. Status active. Oh, that's where I could have added on some other actions in there in the filter query. So I could say if it's created by and status is or status is. So in the get items action in Power Automate, the filter query is quite powerful. In the list rows in Excel, the filter query doesn't work the same as the get items. So the best way to filter data you're pulling from a list rows in Excel is going to be using your conditions, or a filter array is really good. Okay, so now that I added that item, we can see here that it failed. After I refreshed, it failed. So let's actually take a look and see why it failed. Let's actually dive right in there. So we're going to take a look at it, and it failed because of the last step. So we could see here. Now, this is actually going to be good to look at. This is a great pane that you should be getting comfortable with. This is how you view your flow. You can look at failed runs, succeeded runs, and in this case, it tells you what happened. So we can visually see there's an issue down here at the get items, and we can see that the expression created by equals this is not valid. That's because this created by is not the true naming of that field, right? But even though that you saw that it's created by, that's not the right field. Now, what I mean by that is this. So whenever you're running a lot of power flows, we have to use the raw um, data. So how do we get the actual name of that field? Let's actually take a look back at SharePoint. So if I go to this site, I go to the list settings. And if I go down to created by, now what you can't see because it's cut off is in the browser, there's a URL. And at the very end of the URL, you're going to see field equals. The title of the field is going to be all of what's showing after the equal sign. And it's the last word at the end of the URL. So in this case, we're going to fix this. Even though SharePoint calls it created by, we're going to update the filter with the real name. And it's going to look funny because even in here, it says created by, right? Even this dynamic, you're like, oh, shouldn't it be created by? But actually, no, it's called Arthur. We're going to hit save. And what I can do, as a matter of fact, so what I can do is switch over and show you what we need to now change. So what we did is we changed here where it initially said created by, and it said created by. What we did is we changed this to the actual field name, which is Arthur. So now I'm going to hit save. Once I hit save, I'm going to rerun the flow. I'm going to test the flow. And test the flow in the upper right hand corner, I hit test. I can manually test it, but no, in this case, as an automated flow, it says when an item is created. So the best way to test one of your automated flows is going to be automatically with a recently used trigger. And in this case, I'm going to use the failed one. Then I'm going to hit test. You can't see test because it is cut off, but there's a blue button that says test. And then that goes away. And then what happens is it created descending. Okay. So in this case, all the created by is not the issue. It is the created descending, which that actually should have worked. You'll have to drop a comment in there, somebody. Correct me on that. That should have worked. So what I'll do is retest. All right, this time it'll be successful. And again, that's what you're going to be doing when you're building flows. You got to see what caused the issue, go back, fix the issue, look back at that SharePoint, column, right? Like sometimes these little tiny items like this, Copilot is not going to help you in setting up your flow in that way. So building from scratch can be very powerful once you learn how to use the paint brushes. Once you learn how to set up your workstation, if you will, you then can just build and build and build. And the only way to get really good at it is to spend some time in it. Okay. All right. Well, I want to say that this is going to be um, a good spot to kind of pause in setting up a basic Canvas flow. I think that there's going to be much more content to come with more advanced automation workflows. If there's anything that you would like to see specific on how to do, ask away, drop a comment in the video, send me an email. I can be reached at contact@ytvtrainer.com. Send me an email. Let me know what is it that you guys want to see. I'll put it out there. Right now, I do a lot of automation for multi-billion-dollar company. We do a lot of big data things. So feel free to ask away, and I will help dive in and help you launch new flows in Power Automate. All right. All right. Thank you, everybody, for watching today. I hope you find some good value. I want to just ask you all to please like this channel and subscribe if you want to hear more. Don't forget to send me an email, ask me questions if there's anything specific you'd like to see. Other than that, thank you for watching today, and everybody else, have a good night.